Joining us now is Lorin LaFave, whose 14-year-old son Breck was killed in 2014 after being groomed online. Lorin has since set up the Breck Foundation campaigning for greater online safety for children. Thank you so much for joining us, Lorin. We spoke a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? And here we have an egregious example of what can happen when kids get to roam the dark web, get to roam the internet and come into contact with these awful films. I think they call them red room horror films, where they're films of torture. These kids somehow got onto these sites and essentially, I think, groomed themselves and clearly turned themselves into monsters. And that is what we have to protect children from, is it not? How should we go about this? How do we stop any more Brianna Ghey cases happening? How do we stop any more kids managing to get into these red room sites, managing to get onto the dark web? How do we do this?
I think what's really scary is to think of what children are able to access nowadays, and these things become normalized. Violence, over-sexualized behavior becomes the norm because they're accessing these places that portray these behaviors as normal. I think this is a huge problem, and one of the reasons why the Online Safety Act is so important. You know, the algorithms, once someone accesses that sort of information on different platforms that they may be on, will then send them more information on that harmful content. And I think it just, it's not fair to have children be able to access things that are so mature that even many adults would never want to view. And I think it's sort of almost losing the rights of children to be children. And in this case, I do wonder, you know, did other people know, you know, were they that they were accessing this type of material? They obviously were keeping some of their plans quite secret, but it breaks my heart, and my heart does go out to the parents, and especially the mom being a mom, because there's nothing worse than losing a child. I think it all comes down to better education so that young people can understand the repercussions of this sort of behavior and violence. What is the point of killing poor Brianna? Then their lives are over now too. So I think it's just, we have to educate our children to respect and value human life, and also to respect and value all of our differences.
When we talk about children's safety online, all too often we talk about protecting children from adults who might be grooming them, adults who might be posing themselves as children. But in this situation, and in some part in the awful murder of your son, committed by, yes, I suppose technically an adult, but still a very, very young man, we're looking at a radicalisation, if you will, of children. When you set up the foundation, and I assume lots of parents are getting in touch with you with their concerns, what sort of things are they saying? What sort of things are worrying them? What sort of things are their kids looking at, and how is this affecting their behaviours?
Well, I think one of the things with parents is Breck's story and other stories highlight that we don't actually know exactly what our children are accessing online or who they're spending time with. So many parents assume that their children are gaming or socializing with children from school, and that's not always the case. So I think stories like these are really helpful to highlight to parents that we do need to be as aware as we possibly can of what our children are doing online, who we're accessing. But also, I mean, these were friends that knew her in the local community. And I think there is the sort of the confusing bit for a young person that the killers were so young, as in Breck's case. It was, his killer was only a teenager like them. So the more I would try to warn the boys and warn Breck, oh, I think this is some creepy old guy trying to groom you guys through your shared interest of gaming, they realized I was wrong and kind of then threw out their concerns because it was another teenager like them. So sadly, there are dangerous teenagers and children, as we've seen from time to time. I don't know how this happens and how they can get so far astray at such a young age, but I think definitely we need to watch for the signs in this sort of behavior and try to promote young people looking after each other and not turning a blind eye when they overhear things or they might see things that seem a bit worrying or dangerous for other people within their school or online community.
I think also, Lauren, that sending a message to kids that if they do this, you know, if they go onto the dark web, if they go into these awful red room sites and then they take action against other kids like they did against Brianna, sending a message to these kids that if you do that, we will throw the book at you, might be useful. Now, I'm interested to know what you think of the judge in this case, who has announced that when they get sentenced after the new year, these two kids who are they were 15 when they did the crime. I believe they're 16 now. He's going to sort of buck the trend, as it were, and he's going to name them. They're going to be named and identified. And I would suggest that's a good move forward, that if kids do this, no matter how old they are, we name them and we shame them. I mean, John Venables, I know it's not an online issue, but the murderer of poor little Jamie Bulger, at the ripe old age of 41, is still protected by our, and by the way, an habitual criminal and paedophile is still protected by our justice system. We do not know his identity. We do not know what he looks like. I would suggest that's ridiculous. We should know what he looks like. But do you agree with the judge that it is time we started naming kids who do stuff like what happened to Brianna Ghey?
I have been speaking with a lot of people, parents, and we do actually feel that there needs to be stronger messages sent to criminals, especially who, you know, are preying on children. If these people are dangerous at whatever age they commit a crime, if they don't have value and respect for life, then yes, we need to know who they are. We need to make sure that the public are protected, because if someone can be so horribly and graphically violent at such a young age, I don't think that they'll be safe for society in future. And I think that it's really important that young people and the public see that these sentences and the time they spend behind bars is punishment. It needs to be a punishment. And even before thinking of letting anyone out, there needs to be some major rehabilitation. And in Breck's killer's case, as well as these, you know, young people, they're not showing remorse. So if you're not sorry when you did it, you know, you're just not sorry. And so you're not safe for society. And I think we need to make sure that young people and, you know, adults understand that the police do have a lot of skill sets. You know, there was one point where there was a joke, oh, the police will never catch us. You know, we need to make it known, all of the science and the technology, the skills and expertise that police have, that these criminals will be caught and you will throw your own life away. And I think maybe it is an awareness campaign that we need.
The government has recently introduced its online safety bill, and consultations are ongoing as to how elements of that are going to be applied. But during the creation of that, which took a long time, it's pretty late in coming, a lot of the debate focused around free speech and whether people would be allowed to have complete control over what they say and complete privacy of what they put online. And I personally felt that when it came to child safeguarding, it was sort of just thrown to one side at the altar of so-called adult freedom. Why is it, do you think, that people expect more freedom, essentially, in the virtual space to do what they want with impunity than they would ever be granted in reality?
I mean, I think that is a really good question. And one of the things we need to go back to is to remind people that online crimes are the same as face-to-face crimes, and they're not just something that you can say and do and get away with. I think it needs to be clear that online crimes and abuse are just as hurtful, can be just as hurtful. And we've experienced that as a family, especially one of my daughters who was harassed and really targeted with some really graphic, horrible content surrounding her brother's murder. So yeah, this man wasn't necessarily hurting her physically, but it was really difficult for, you know, her mental well-being. So I think it is really important that we understand that whilst privacy, of course, is important, child protection and keeping people safe should be our #1 priority.
Lorin LaFave, founder of the Breck Foundation, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you.